Watch closely. These are the signs from God you asked for and haven't noticed yet. How many times have you asked God for a sign while accidentally overlooking the answer? Think about that honestly. How many prayers have sounded like this, Lord? Show me what to do, God. Give me confirmation, please. Make the direction clear. Because uncertainty is exhausting. Waiting is exhausting. Trying to make important decisions without clarity can make a person feel spiritually stuck. Maybe you know that feeling. You prayed for guidance about a relationship, a decision, a closed door, a future you cannot fully see yet. You asked heaven for direction, and silence seemed to be the only response. But what if the problem is not that God stayed silent? What if the problem is that you expected him to speak differently? That question changes everything, because many people are not suffering because God refused to answer. They are suffering because they expected dramatic certainty, while God was offering subtle guidance. They asked for lightning. God sent quiet conviction. They asked for immediate clarity. God sent gradual discernment. They asked for unmistakable signs. God spoke through peace, delay, redirection, discomfort, timing, and moments they almost ignored. That happens more often than people realize, because God's voice is not always louder. Sometimes it is simply more subtle than people expect. And perhaps that is why some people remain stuck longer than necessary. Not because heaven abandoned them, because they keep searching for spectacular confirmation while overlooking quiet direction already unfolding around them. Think carefully about this. What if one of the signs you prayed for is already happening in your life, and missing it could keep you confused longer than necessary? What if God is already guiding you, but you have been filtering his guidance through expectations he never promised? That possibility deserves attention, because divine communication does not always arrive wrapped in dramatic moments. Sometimes it arrives as something surprisingly simple, unexpected peace, the kind of peace that makes no logical sense, yet quietly refuses to leave. And that may be the first sign you have been asking God to send without realizing it. Sign 1, the unexpected peace you cannot explain. One of the most overlooked signs from God is not dramatic certainty. It is unexpected peace. That sounds strange to many people, because when people ask God for direction, they often expect complete answers, a detailed plan, visible guarantees, clear outcomes, something undeniable. But sometimes God does not remove every question immediately. He gives peace before explanations arrive. That distinction matters deeply, because there are moments when logic still sees uncertainty, yet something inside your spirit becomes unexpectedly calm. Not because every problem disappeared, not because you suddenly understand everything, because peace quietly entered a situation that still lacks complete clarity. Pay attention to that. Many people dismiss peace because they expected certainty. They think if this were truly God, I would understand everything already. Not necessarily. Divine direction does not always begin with total visibility. Sometimes it begins with internal confirmation. The quiet sense that despite unanswered questions, you are not moving against your spirit. That does not mean emotions disappear. Fear may still exist. Questions may still exist. Incomplete information may still exist. But beneath the noise, there is an unusual steadiness. A calm that feels strangely stronger than circumstances should allow, that deserves attention. Because spiritual peace is not passivity, it is discernment. And maybe someone listening right now has already experienced this without recognizing it. You kept asking for a sign, while quietly feeling peace about a direction you kept doubting because it did not come with perfect certainty. Or perhaps the opposite happened. Everything looked correct externally. The opportunity made sense, the timing looked ideal, the logic seemed convincing, but peace never fully arrived. That matters too. Because discernment is not only about what appears promising externally, it is also about learning to notice what your spirit keeps communicating internally, not impulsively, not emotionally, honestly, prayerfully, attentively. Because sometimes God's guidance sounds less like loud certainty and more like deep peace that refuses to disappear. And sometimes God speaks not through what opens, but through what refuses to open. Through the closed door you keep questioning. The opportunity that never worked no matter how hard you forced it. The answer you resented because it looked like disappointment. And that may be another sign you have been misunderstanding all along. Sign 2, the closed door you keep resenting. Few things frustrate people more than closed doors, especially when you prayed, prepared, tried, believed, and still. The opportunity collapsed. The relationship ended. The plan stalled. The answer remained no. That kind of disappointment creates difficult questions. God, why did this not work? Why would you let me care about something that never opened? Why does it feel like every direction I try keeps shutting down? Those questions are real, because closed doors often feel personal. They feel like rejection, like delay, like spiritual silence. But what if some of the answers you call disappointing were actually protective? That possibility changes perspective, because not every closed door is punishment. Some closed doors are rescue. Think about how uncomfortable that truth can be, especially when you cannot see what God sees. You only see the opportunity you wanted, the timeline you preferred. The outcome you imagined would finally solve the uncertainty. But divine protection often feels frustrating before it becomes understandable. That is why people usually recognize certain miracles in hindsight, years later, looking back, suddenly saying, "Now I understand why that did not work. Now I understand why that relationship ended. Now, I understand why that delay protected me from something I was emotionally unprepared to see." That happens more than people realize. Because God's guidance is not always about opening the right door immediately. Sometimes it is about refusing access to the wrong one. And maybe someone listening right now is fighting a battle they did not expect. Not the battle of choosing between options. The battle of accepting an answer they did not want. Accepting the closed door. Accepting the delay. Accepting the uncomfortable possibility that disappointment and protection can occasionally wear similar clothing for a season. That requires trust. Because divine timing rarely satisfies human urgency perfectly. But what if the door that closed was not evidence that God ignored your prayer? What if it was evidence that He answered differently than you expected? That question deserves honest reflection. Because while you kept asking God why something did not work, another sign may have been repeating quietly inside your life. A conviction, a discomfort, a warning that refused to disappear, even after the emotions settled. And perhaps you have been ignoring it because it did not arrive in the form you expected. Sign 3. The repeated inner conviction you keep ignoring. Not every sign from God appears outside of you. Sometimes the signal keeps repeating inside you. That uncomfortable feeling that refuses to disappear. That conviction you tried to silence. That quiet internal warning that returns. Even after the excitement fades, the pressure decreases, or the emotion settles. Pay attention to that. Because one of the most overlooked forms of divine guidance is recurring inner conviction. Not panic, not impulsive fear. Conviction. There is a difference. Fear screams. Conviction persists. Fear changes with moods. Conviction often remains after moods calm down. That distinction matters deeply, because many people confuse discernment with anxiety, or ignore discernment because they assume it is only anxiety. But ask yourself honestly, has there been something inside you repeatedly asking for deeper attention? A relationship you keep trying to justify, yet your spirit remains uneasy? A decision that looks correct externally, yet something internally refuses complete peace? A habit, an environment, a direction, a compromise. Something you keep revisiting because the internal signal never fully disappears. That deserves honest reflection. Because if the warning keeps returning after the emotion passes, perhaps it deserves deeper attention, not blind panic. Attention, prayerful examination, spiritual honesty. Because discernment requires courage. The courage to ask difficult questions. The courage to admit when your desires and your discernment are not saying the same thing. The courage to stop demanding external confirmation while ignoring internal clarity. And maybe this explains why some people remain confused longer than necessary, not because God refused to guide them, because they kept asking for louder signs while resisting quieter truth already unfolding inside them. That truth can be uncomfortable, because sometimes the sign you asked for is not external confirmation. It is internal clarity you keep resisting. The clarity that challenges convenience. The clarity that disrupts emotional attachment. The clarity that asks you to slow down, reconsider, surrender, or trust differently. And perhaps you are feeling that tension right now. But another misunderstood sign often creates that tension too. Delay. The waiting season you keep interpreting as silence. while something deeper is quietly changing inside you. Sign 4. The delay that is quietly changing you. Few things test faith like delay. Not because waiting is always painful by itself, because waiting creates questions. God, why is this taking so long? Did I misunderstand your direction? Did you forget what I prayed for? Why does it feel like nothing is moving? Those questions live inside many people who are sincerely trying to discern God's guidance. Because waiting seasons are often misunderstood. People assume delay automatically means denial, silence, abandonment, lack of divine movement. But what if delay is not always blocking the answer? What if sometimes it is preparing the person who will receive it? That perspective changes the emotional atmosphere completely. Because not every waiting season is empty space. Some waiting seasons are formation, internal preparation, the slow development of discernment, maturity, patience, dependence, and spiritual clarity. That truth is difficult to appreciate while you are living inside frustration, because human beings naturally want movement, clear movement, visible progress, immediate reassurance. But God occasionally uses delay differently, not to destroy trust, to deepen it. Think carefully about how often people pray for guidance, while secretly asking God to remove uncertainty immediately. Yet sometimes God allows the waiting because certainty is not the deepest lesson happening in the season. Formation is. The waiting quietly changes the person. The priorities shift. The motivations become clearer. The emotional attachments become more visible. The discernment becomes sharper. The dependence becomes deeper. That does not mean waiting feels pleasant. It means delay may be carrying purpose you cannot fully see yet. And perhaps someone listening right now needs to hear this honestly. The season frustrating you may be changing you more than you realize. Not everything delayed is forgotten. Not everything postponed is abandoned. Sometimes heaven slows the process because the preparation matters as much as the outcome. And maybe, just maybe, the sign you asked for has been hidden inside the waiting itself. Not because God enjoys prolonging confusion, because He is shaping perception, trust, and readiness simultaneously. But divine guidance does not only appear through peace, closed doors, conviction, or delay. Sometimes God speaks through something much more ordinary. A conversation you almost dismissed. An interruption you did not expect. A repeated theme that keeps showing up in your life until your heart finally notices. Sign 5, the people, interruptions, or moments you almost overlooked. One of the biggest misconceptions people carry about signs from God is believing they must always look spectacular. Something dramatic, something unmistakably supernatural, something impossible to misinterpret. But God often speaks through ordinary moments carrying unusual weight. That matters more than many people realize. Because divine guidance is not always wrapped in extraordinary events. Sometimes it arrives through a conversation you almost ignored, advice that kept repeating through different people, a sentence that unexpectedly stayed in your mind long after the moment ended, an interruption you initially viewed as inconvenient, a delay that redirected your path, a theme that keeps appearing quietly until you can no longer dismiss it easily. Pay attention to patterns, not paranoid searching. Attentive awareness. There is a difference, because God does not always send spectacular signs. Sometimes He repeats ordinary signals until your heart notices. That truth challenges modern expectations, because many people want guidance that removes all need for discernment. But spiritual attentiveness often grows through noticing what others would dismiss too quickly. Think about your own life honestly. Has there been advice you keep hearing from trusted people? A lesson that keeps repeating through different circumstances? A conversation that affected you more deeply than you expected? A moment you almost brushed aside, yet it continued returning to your mind during prayer, reflection, or quiet moments? Those experiences deserve attention, not blind interpretation, prayerful reflection. Because spiritual sensitivity is not about forcing meaning into everything. It is about slowing down enough to notice when something ordinary carries unusual spiritual weight. That requires awareness, humility, patience, the willingness to admit that God's communication may not always arrive through the dramatic format you preferred. And perhaps that is why some people miss guidance repeatedly, not because God refused to communicate, because life remained too noisy, too rushed, too distracted to notice what heaven was already highlighting quietly. That realization changes something important. Because maybe the signs you asked for are not absent, maybe they are closer than you think, hidden inside peace, closed doors, conviction, delay, people, timing, repeated moments. subtle guidance, which leads to one final truth many people desperately need to hear. Perhaps the biggest misunderstanding about signs from God is not missing them completely. It is misunderstanding what signs were ever designed to do in the first place. What if the biggest misunderstanding about signs from God is this? You expected a sign strong enough to eliminate faith completely. Think about that honestly. Many people ask God for signs, but what they are really asking for is perfect certainty, a guarantee, a risk-free answer, a level of clarity so undeniable that trust no longer feels necessary. That desire is understandable, because uncertainty is uncomfortable. Discernment requires vulnerability. Walking forward without total visibility can feel emotionally expensive. But what if signs were never designed to remove the need for faith entirely? What if they were designed to guide trust, not replace it? That distinction changes everything, because sometimes the sign is not proof strong enough to remove uncertainty. It is guidance strong enough to invite trust. That matters deeply. Because many people keep postponing obedience while waiting for a dramatic confirmation God never promised. Meanwhile, subtle direction is already present. Peace, conviction, closed doors, timing, formation, repeated themes. Quiet guidance asking for discernment instead of demanding spectacle. And maybe someone listening right now needs freedom from impossible expectations. You may not receive every answer instantly. You may not receive dramatic certainty. You may not understand every detail of what God is doing immediately, but God's guidance can still be present, deeply present, faithfully present. Because walking with God was never meant to become a relationship built entirely on perfect visibility. It is a relationship built on trust, discernment, sensitivity, learning to recognize His leadership even when the path still contains unanswered questions. And perhaps that is the real invitation inside this message. Not becoming obsessed with signs, becoming more attentive to God, more aware, more discerning, more willing to notice the subtle ways heaven may already be responding. Because maybe the signs you ask for are already closer than you think.